again, Acharei-Kedoshim. Acharei means after the death of the two sons of Aaron. Kedoshim means holy. Now, holy is a terrible word in English because I don't know what it means. In Hebrew, kadosh means separate. Is that right? How would you translate it?
Holy.
Ronen? Huh?
Holy, I think.
Yeah, but holy. What does holy mean? What's the word holy mean?
You know better.
That's the problem. And the
Don't you say nifrad for separate?
huh?
Nifrad.
Holy.
Yeah, nifrad is separate, but the word holy does mean separate. Means we'll come to it. Let's pretend it means separate for the moment.
But yeah,
Special.
Because
Special.
just before Havdalah we got Kodesh the
Yes.
Mavdil, so that's right.
Yeah,
Separate.
separate and special. And we're going to see that we're going to try and wrestle a bit with what that means for you and me, because the first of these two sedras starts off by saying, "I'm holy, and you've got to be holy." What does that mean? And it's a mitzvah on us to be kodesh. So if it's a mitzvah on us and we've got to do it, you've got to know what it means. And it's very difficult to understand what it means. We're going to see how that works. Now, in the first of the two parshas in Acharei-Mois, there's one aspect of this which we'll come to in a minute. In the second of the sedras, we have the reading that we read on Yom Kippur afternoon in Mincha. Now, Yom Kippur is the holiest day of the year. Mincha is arguably the holiest part of the day, finishing as it does with Ne'ilah. But before that, Mincha is the holiest part of Shabbos. And the laning, or the Torah reading that we say on Yom Kippur afternoon, is incredibly who you can have sex with and who you can't. Right? That's what the section is about. Forbidden relationships versus relationships which are not forbidden. And so many of the commentators say, you've got to be kidding. It's Yom Kippur afternoon, the holiest day in the year.
You're doing this.
And what are we learning? Sexual behavior. This is the best you can come up with, God, for what we have to do on Yom Kippur. And the answer is dafki, yes. This is the why. So the answer to that lies in a pathway of perspective. I'm going to try and explain that perspective, and it's not popular, I've got to tell you. So I'm asking you to, I'm just wondering if this is on. Excuse me a second. Yeah, it is on, sorry. So you need to expand your horizons to understand this and not to be threatened by any of the concepts, because they are prohibitive and threatening. So let's start with this. The question, maybe I'll explain it like this. We have four states in creation: Doimim, Tzemeach, Chai, Medaberim. That means inert matter, growing things, animals, humanity. Those four states, according to our perspective, have no crossover. You've got to understand this is very important, because for those people who want to believe in evolution, we believe in evolution within those categories. So you can take a orange and a whatever else it is, and you can graft them together, and you'll make a what do you call it?
Yeah.
Tangerine or whatever it
Tangerine,
is,
yeah.
and that tangerine will have offspring of tangerines. But you can't have a crossover from one to the other. So stone can never become a growing thing can never become an animal can never become a human being. An ape cannot become a monkey, a human being. An ape is an animal, a human being is a human being. Now, one of the properties of each of those groups is that there are strict limitations in what they need. So a stone needs nothing. What does a stone need? Doesn't it? A plant needs air and air, water, and sunlight. Right? But if you give an animal air, water, and sunlight, it's not enough. The animal can't live on air, light, and sunlight. It needs exercise. It needs to go hunting. It needs to find food. And it's full of emotion. So it has emotional needs and emotional reactions. If you move up to the next level of humanity, humanity can't live on what an animal lives on. It's not enough for us to eat raw meat and chase out and hunt. It's not enough. We need to build civilizations. We need to have music and opera and drama and theatre and whatever else that a human being needs. Now, in terms of responsibility, not in terms of superiority, I don't want this to be misunderstood. Since Jews are have the highest responsibility in humanity, in the sense that we have to bring physicality into spirituality, spirituality into physicality, we need something extra again. We need Torah and mitzvahs. And if a Jew is bereft of Torah and mitzvahs, his life is missing something. He not everybody feels it particularly, but they feel it generally. They don't know why they feel it. I've often given this example that I've been a solicitor for 60 odd years, and in that period of time, my generation, my parents' generation, more than my parents were Holocaust survivors. They came to America, Australia, South Africa, and they thought the solution, and they were very poor in Europe, most of them, and they believed that the solution to their problems was to make money. So they all went to it, and they're clever and they're successful and they made money. And my practice has been in the eastern suburbs in Double Bay. So numerically, a big proportion of the people made a lot of money and were very rich, and are very rich. And tragically, they found that there was nowhere near enough. Nowhere near enough. And you get people who have $100 million and $500 million and $1 billion. And I've got clients who are on the rich list with billions of dollars, and their lives are terrible. They have no idea how to live. And one of them has sat across my desk and cried and said if he had his life again, he'd want to be frum. And that's something that there is a need in Jews for this Torah and mitzvahs, like there's a need in humanity for theatre and music, like there is a need in animals for food and express some emotional, like there is in growing things only for whatever it is, light, sunlight and water and each group has its own needs. Now, one of the corollaries of this, I'm telling you stuff which is absolutely fundamentally deep into Hasidus and Kabbalah. One of the the corollaries to this is that you have to understand that all of creation, all of the life that you and I lead, has boundaries. Just like the plant has boundaries that it only needs water and sunlight and earth, and a Jew needs Torah and mitzvahs. You try and bring Torah and mitzvahs to a plant, and it doesn't. It's the wrong boundaries. Try and bring a plant's life to a human being. It's not enough. They're the wrong boundaries. And these boundaries, we live in a society where, unfortunately, these boundaries have been totally trampled on and blurred.
Smashed.
People want to have, and I have to tell you, in many cases, the motives are very noble. The woke generation that we live in have a lot of nobility in their thinking, right? They think that if somebody is limited, they are deprived, and so they think that if they get rid of that deprivation, they're going to make that person freer and happier. And the reality is that nothing can be further from the truth. And this is not popular. It's not politically correct. But I'm going to teach you Sikhs from these are Sikhs from the Rebbe. They are pure Torah, on pure Torah, and it's fundamental to understanding your life and my life that we understand as a Jew, needing Torah and mitzvahs, you have to tune into this basic fact of what these boundaries are. So really, it makes a great deal of sense that on Yom Kippur afternoon, we learn about forbidden sexual relations. Why? Because sex is such a fundamentally deep and graphic drive. The whole of the human race and the animal kingdom and the plant kingdom depends on fertilization and procreation. So the drives that come with this are very, very strong, and it's very inconvenient to be limited all of a sudden. And people don't like it. People don't like to be limited. So you get, let's take a forbidden relationship that's easy. Adultery. We are prohibited from committing adultery, as that's defined, and that's, first of all, you've got to understand the halachas of what that means, but let's just say in the simple sense, having intercourse with a married woman, other than your wife. So those people who are attracted to a married woman and she's responsive, they don't want to hear this. They don't want to hear that they can't commit adultery. They'll find a heter for themselves. God really understands me, whatever it is. They'll try and find some wriggle room to make it work, right? But the fact is that these boundaries that we're going to be talking about, watching the clock, these boundaries are set in stone. There is no wriggle room. And the reason that they're set in stone is that you come back to a much bigger, broader, more difficult question of what's right and wrong. You know, if you want to judge what's right and wrong by human logic, it's very, very easy to go wrong for the most noble of reasons. Let me give you an example. You have a relative or somebody that you know who tragically, God forbid, is terminally ill and is in agony, in pain, terrible pain. I had a client. It was kind of semi-relative to one of my in-laws, and he had very bad prostate cancer, and he died in Walper. Walper was still then more of a hospital than a recovery place. And when I went to visit him, he held me by the arm and he said, "You know what's the worst thing for me? That every morning that I wake up, I'm so disappointed I didn't die, and I've got to have another day of agony." Right? You understand that? So somebody with human logic is going to say, and out of nobility, out of love, let's help him to kill himself. Yeah. Can you do that? You can't do that because it's one of the 10 Commandments. You can't murder. That is halakhically murder. We don't believe in mercy killing. It's not allowed. Al pi halakha. So, but on human logic, that's wrong. On human logic, what if the guy is begging you to help him suicide so he doesn't have to wake up in agony tomorrow morning? Human logic and human kindness dictates that you're going to help him. But you can't. Why not?
Yeah.
So we learn like this, that there is no wriggle room, that there has to be a fundamental standard of what's right and wrong. And that can be very inconvenient. Let's keep talking about the sexual relations for a moment. You know, when I was a kid at school, it was still illegal. Homosexuality was illegal. You know that in this country and in England, it was illegal, and it was only when just when I first got married in about 1969. I'm not sure of the year, but suddenly there was a new language that sexual intercourse between consenting adults in the privacy of their own home. That was the legal magic sentence, right? They had to be of age, so adults, in the privacy of their own home, and they had to be consenting. Under those conditions, that became legal. So homosexuality, under those conditions, became legal. I'm not suggesting that it should be illegal. You've got to get this clear. I'm telling you what a Jew is permitted to do and what he's not permitted to do, not according to the state's law, but according to what we believe is right and wrong. Right? What's right mean? Consistent with Ratzon Hashem. What's wrong means contrary to Ratzon Hashem. Now, if Hashem says that homosexuality is wrong and you can't male homosexuality, by the way, not female homosexuality. Female homosexuality is not included in this Issa, al pi halakha. Why? Because there's no loss of sperm. So sperm has a life force, and there's a whole spiritual thing about wasting that seed, and it's
very serious.
Yeah.
So for a woman, that's not so, and that's true. I've got the tapes on, and the language is fairly graphic, but I can't teach this any other way. Male masturbation is forbidden. Female masturbation is not forbidden for the same reason. Now, does that mean that it's easy not to masturbate, or it's easy not to have intercourse with? If people say that homosexuals are born, right? So you have to have pity on a homosexual, because what's he to do? He doesn't want to have sex with a woman. It does nothing for him. So what does he want? He wants to have sex with a man. How long can you deny that? I've had Rabbi Feldman has told me about a guy that we know in common that went to see him, and he said, "What does God want from me? You know, I look at a woman, I'm looking at a piece of stone. I look at some men, and I'm sexually excited. What am I supposed to do?" There's a letter from the Rebbe to a man who writes to the Rebbe and asks exactly that question. He says that he's a homosexual, and that and he wants to be frum, and he wants to be a Baal Tshuva, and he wants to keep kashrus, and he said, "But what do I do with this?" And the Rebbe, it's a famous letter. It's a very, very sensitive, beautiful, warm 2 or 3 page letter. where the Rebbe goes through the fact that every neshama has its tests, and every neshama that has its tests has the ability to deal with those tests. Otherwise, Hashem wouldn't give them to you. Otherwise, Hashem is a sadist, God forbid. So if Hashem is giving you that, that is a salute to you and your power to be able to handle this. And you're one of a very small minority who has this power, and you have to, there's no question that you can do it, otherwise Hashem wouldn't give it to you. Now, if you fail and you do tshuva, okay, so we understand. But you have to understand that there's nothing right about it. Right? And that's very difficult because, like with everything else, it got publicized, and then the gay rights movement started, and the Mardi Gras started, and then they had their own coloured rainbows, and A, B, C, D, L, B, G, everything, and people have become immune to any sensitivity that it is wrong in any way, and it's now legal. But for Jews, you have to understand that it is wrong. Why? Because Hashem says it's wrong. The Torah says it's wrong, so you can't. Now, let me explain the danger to the woke system. The danger is that if you say there's nothing wrong with male homosexuality, let's go to the next step. If you say that consenting adults should be able to have whatever form of sex that they want, I'll give you another thing that's forbidden in Jewish law. You can't watch somebody else have sex. So we don't have orgies. Jews are not allowed to have an orgy. But a woke person who's using only human logic is going to say to you, well, why not? They're consenting adults. They're not harming anybody. If they were raping somebody, God forbid, you understand it. But if they don't, they're not hurting anybody. They're doing it in the privacy of their own home. They're not influencing anybody else. Why can't they do it? And on human logic, I'll tell you what, it's very difficult to find an answer, and there isn't one. And let's push the envelope further. If you have two 18-year-old, 19-year-old, 20-year-old siblings, right? Why can't they have sex within the privacy of their own home or their own flat? What's wrong? And all of a sudden, people start to move uncomfortably. Now brother and sister, it's getting too hard now, right? But let's take it further. Mother and son, father and daughter. It all ought to follow that it should be all right, because why not? They're consenting, they're adults, they're in the privacy of their own home, they're not hurting anybody else. The mother that's wanting to sleep with her son and the son who's wanting to sleep with the mother, they're not hurting anybody. She's not forcing him, he's not forcing her. There's no rape involved. So why not? So what's our answer to why not? Our answer to why not is we are Jews. We have to be kodesh. And what does it mean, kodesh? We have to be separate. That human logic does not persuade us, because we have to understand that we have to walk to the beat of a different drum. We are walking to the beat of Torah. And if Torah says it's wrong, no matter if it's illogical to you, or no matter if it seems that it's harsh, or it seems that's our belief system. That's what we've got to subscribe to, whether you like it or not. And the truth is, I remember once Rabbi Y.Y. Jacobson was here in town, and he was farbringing. He's fantastic, and he was farbringing, and he said that he'd heard from one of his teachers, I think it might have been Yoel Khan, that somebody said, I want to be free. I don't want these restrictions because these restrictions give you a miserable life. And Rabbi YY told us that the moshel was that he was talking to a violin, and the violin had strings, and the strings had to be stretched tight. And the tighter they were stretched, the more beautiful was the melody.
Yeah.
If you undid the strings and let them go free, and the strings could do whatever they want, there'd be no music.
Yeah,
The music comes from the restriction of the string. And if the string is a string, then it's going to produce real music. Unfortunately, this is the hardest concept for a so-called civilized person in our day and age, who thinks that he's intelligent and liberated and doesn't see the need for these boundaries. I don't need these boundaries. Right? You know why it says in Shema that you can't run after your eyes and follow your eyes? Because your eyes take you and lead you astray. That's what the Shema says.
Yeah.
You've got to say no.
Yeah.
And the saying no is our way of beginning our journey to being Kodesh. Now, there are two things. One is saying no or saying yes, respecting boundaries. The other is that the two terms. One's called escafia, which means refusing to do something that's wrong or insisting on doing something that's right. The other is called eskapkop, which means that you take the bad and you change it into something good, right? A person likes to cut and hurt, or not hurt, but cut and draw blood. It's a horrible thing, but he loves it. So instead of doing anything wrong with it, he becomes a shoichet. That's taking his Yetzer Hara and turning it into a Yetzer Tov to do something good with it. Okay, l'chaim. Once we're talking about this, maybe we'll get the tape suppressed if necessary, but let me take you a bit further with this. I want to show you how completely this goes into how much territory it goes. When I was growing up, pornography in Australia was forbidden. Right? We had censorship, and pornography was unavailable. Was unavailable and prohibited. Now, when I got married to Anne in 1969, we rented a house in Bellevue Hill. My father-in-law rented us a house in Bellevue Hill while our accommodation was being prepared. We was doing it up, and we got a short-term lease that we went there. And this house was in Bulkara Road, and it was owned by a solicitor. And this solicitor was bald, and in those days everybody wore a suit, of course, and a tie and a suit, and very carefully dressed to go to the office. And he looked very respectable and all the rest of it. And we went there, and he took me for a tour of the house with Anne, and showed us where everything worked and how everything worked. And then he said, "But this is my study, and the door to this room has to remain locked, and you're not allowed access." And I wanted in the lease that you won't go into the property. Why? Because he's got clients' files in there, and it's all confidential, and I have to respect that. And you're a solicitor, Robert, so you'll respect that. Yes, sir, yes. So we did. Anyway, he left. About a week or 10 days after we moved in, we got burgled. We got burgled and were so frightened that we spent the rest of the time in her parents' house with the parents. It was worth it to to live with her parents rather than her be frightened. But
How much they steal?
so now, I'm about to tell you, they didn't steal anything.
Just
But what did
broke
they
the
do?
room.
They broke into the room, and you know what the
Ah.
room had? Pornography. Pornography like I never saw anything. But you have to understand that nobody ever saw anything. I mean, you got to know that the first Playboy magazine to show more than breasts didn't come out till about 1970, 71.
79.
Okay, whatever it was. Okay, whatever. Playboy. Yeah.
Still keep
That's
it.
the Joker jump from the ship, you remember? I've got a picture for it.
Yeah. Anyway, so this pornography and this had everything. They had everything. There were photographs and there were paintings, and don't forget there was no electronics then, so there was no movies or anything. But the pictures were just, and I didn't know what to do with this because how do you face him? You know, is he going to think that I broke into his room to see his pornography? And once somebody else had broken into his room, I knew that he had this pornography, right? He knew that I knew, so it was very, very awkward. So, question is there anything wrong with pornography? What's wrong? You're a consenting adult. You're in the privacy of your own home. Let's say you bought the thing secretly so that nobody saw you buy it, whatever the rules are. So you have to know that in terms of our halakha, viewing pornography is forbidden.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it is forbidden. Now, I'm only saying that because
Let me answer
I
yourself.
want this shir to be realistic. I mean,
Yeah.
so when I say unfortunately it's forbidden. So I had a guy that I used to
No
learn
way,
with,
rabbis don't look at pornography.
and he was a very clever person. And I'm going to tell you another halakha for a moment. You know, you have to hear shofar on Rosh Hashanah, right? You have to. So, and what happens if you're sick? So you have to try and get someone to come to the house and blow shofar for you, or blow it yourself. Learn how to blow it. So there's a question when radio came out first. The question that was put to the poiskim was, is it okay to hear shofar over the radio?
No.
Right? Huh?
No.
The answer is no. Why not? Because you're not hearing the shofar, you're hearing electronic or magnetic electronic, I don't understand what I'm talking about, waves which imitate the sound of the shofar, but it's not the sound of the shofar. Right? So why is pornography forbidden? Because you're not allowed to look at another woman who's not your spouse in her nakedness. You're not allowed to look at another woman. I mean, not even talking about having sex with her. You're not allowed to look at her.
Goes back to these basic laws.
So if you're not allowed to look at her, then you can't look at him in a magazine. This guy that I'm learning with, he's really smart, and he says, "What about shofar? Shofar, you're not really listening to the shofar. So here, you're not really looking at her. What are you looking at? You're looking at a picture. A picture's not a woman. A picture's not a person. So why can't you?"
So what's the answer?
I'll tell you, it's not part of the shir, but I'll tell you the answer. The answer is that with shofar, you actually have to physically hear the sound, and it's not an emotional reaction. It's a physical requirement that you hear shofar. When you look at an illicit photograph, it's certainly not a woman, but it is going to elicit the same forbidden emotions that you are trying to avoid it when you say Shema, not to look after your eyes and whatever the translation is, which lead you astray. Right?
Yeah.
So the emotion is triggered, whether it's a photograph or a. So that's the answer to why you can't do that. Okay. So is it difficult for a Jew to be kodesh, to live separately in our generation with all of these so-called restrictions, which the rest of society's thrown out the window? They've thrown it out the window. I mean, if you want to go to horrific lengths, there are Muslims that believe that rape is okay.
Yeah.
Huh? What? No? Excuse me, Ronin. Certainly they do. The Quran allows rape under very many situations. And
Yes, sick.
I want you to know that it's if a man rapes a woman according to the Quran, and I'm not a specialist in this, but this I know is it's her fault. It's not, we have a mortgage fund. We lend money to people. The law in this country has become so stupid and perverse that if the borrower can't pay, it's the lender's fault.
It's ridiculous.
That is the law. That is the law. If a borrower can't pay, it's the lender. There are exceptions to this, but I'm talking about for domestic loans and not commercial loans. This isn't a sheer on law, but the fundamental nonsense is that if you lend money and if the person is lying to you, still it's your fault. You should have looked further. You should have investigated further. Now, with not Muslim, what do you call them? The Arabs, the guy that was shooting in Bondi. What are they?
Terrorists.
Yeah.
Islamic.
Yeah, Islam. With Islam, in Islam, it's the fault of the woman for not being properly covered and being properly dressed. And if she's not properly dressed and the guy rapes her, well, it's her fault. Now, these are how far these boundaries have been thrown away. And we can't live like that as Jews, because that is not being Kodesh. Now, am I saying that everybody that's wearing a kapota that goes to shul and with a black hat and puts on tefillin every day observes all of this? I'm not saying that at all. Our job is to learn Torah and know where the goalposts are, and we fail and we succeed. And when you fail, you need to do tshuva. But if you don't know what's right and what's wrong, you can't do tshuva. Yeah. And the rule of what's right and what's wrong is not human logic, because human logic will take you into father and mother, sister and brother. I'll give you another example, and this is unbelievable. If a man has sexual intercourse with another man, and the second man is 17 years old, because the age of consent in this country at the moment, I think, is still 18. I don't know, but I think it is. Now, let's say that the guy is 17 and 10 months, and the partner is 19 or 20 or whatever it is. He is a pedophile. You know that? You know that legally he is a pedophile.
Because the other one's under 18.
Because he's under 18. The moment he turns 18, it's suddenly a mitzvah.
That's right.
It's become a mitzvah, right? It's sex between consenting adults, and now they can have the LGBT banner and have all the coloured. Now it's fine. Now it's perfect. 2 months earlier, he's a pedophile. And you know what you do with pedophiles?
Same with ladies.
What?
Same with the lady.
Yeah.
If you have a lady.
Exactly the same.
Yeah.
Exactly the same with the lady. So, and she's a pedophile, but this is not because homosexuality is forbidden. It's because the girl is underage.
Yeah.
But again, once she comes over age,
Chick-chack.
it's all right. But it's all right by us anyway. That's what I'm trying to tell you that
Yeah.
with Alpi Torah, Alpi Kabbalah, it's no good, but
You told her she can't have sex before she gets married anyway.
with another woman,
No, I'm saying with a man and a woman
no,
before
a
she
man
gets
and a
married.
woman until they get married can't have sex.
What about Shida? She is 17 and he is 20.
Who's Shina?
Shidas, between the Jewish. She is 17
She has to be
and he
married.
is 20.
What
He is
about-
20
what-
years old and
Married,
the girls, they are married. Shidas.
They don't have to be married. They get married. That's a marriage.
Yeah.
One of the ways of getting married.
So it's a
is
legal
through-
marriage.
Yes.
Yeah,
Legal marriage,
yeah,
of course
yeah,
it's legal.
Okay.
It's a mitzvah.
It's a
Yeah.
mitzvah,
Yeah.
Okay. So, who is holy? Somebody who keeps
he's so
Hashem's laws.
75?
That's how we define it. So when it says, I am holy, it says Hashem, I do Ratzon Hashem, and you have to be holy, you have to do Ratzon Hashem. That is a mitzvah on us, but now we have to understand what that means. What does it mean to be holy? That I've just been giving you the examples from Yom Kippur, but our way of life needs to be governed by the boundaries that are set out in Torah. For example, we have an obligation to respect parents. Now, respect parents and not to love them? There's no obligation to love them. So, what if you've got an abusive parent? What do you do with an abusive parent? You have to love the abusive. You don't have to love them, but you have to respect that. Why? Because they gave you life.
How can you respect if they're abusive?
Exactly.
Yeah. So you have to there are a whole web of halakas of what you have to do and what you don't have to do. And we can go through it, but it's a halakhish here, and we don't have time for it now. But I promise you that there are things that you have to do. For example, if that parent is in need of food, you have to give him food,
Even if they're abusive.
even if they're abusive. Yeah. You don't have to like them.
No. But normally respect and love it, aren't they together?
No.
No.
We have obligations with elders. You see on television these kids on the bikes. It was on the news tonight. They jump some old guy who was walking, and they thump their bikes around him, frighten him to death, and the guy ends up in hospital. And they're doing it for fun. It's absolutely forbidden for us. An older person comes in. The Rebbe had teachers who came to 770, and they were now old, and they came in. The Rebbe was fabricating. He stood up.
Mm-hmm.
Stood up for them. He's the Rebbe. They coming to fab, but because they taught him something at one point of time, and he stood up. Tzedakah. I'll give you another example. We have to give tzedakah. You don't like to give tzedakah? Who cares? You got to give. You've got to give a certain minimum amount and a certain, not go beyond a certain maximum amount, unless it's for the reasons set out in Tanya. But you've got to give tzedakah. That's one of the boundaries. You can't just make money and not give tzedakah. Give you another example. Being honest in business. We have got to be honest, and we can't lie, can't cheat. Do people lie and cheat?
Of course they do.
Of course. Can you support it with logic? He cheated me last time. He owes me for that. He did this. He did that. You go back 4 generations. They did that and they did that. But darlings, there is no argument. There's no fuzzy line. That's what it means to be kodesh. There is no fuzzy line. You can't lie. You can't cheat. You can't rip your fellow man off. We got to keep Shabbos. You got to keep Shabbos. What does that mean? You got to keep Shabbos. You got to keep Shabbos. All of it. Kosher. You got to keep kosher. Mezuzah. You got to put a mezuzah on every door that's high of a mezuzah. You got to put on film. You got to put on film, except on Shabbos and Yom Tov. Now, you're saying to me, but I can't do all of that, especially not in one jump. Agreed. I mean, I was there. I didn't know what Yom Kippur was 50 years ago. So I get it, but it has to be a progressive journey where you are taking on more and more, and you are conscious of the areas that you're messing up in. And the areas you're messing up in are those areas where you're not conforming to Torah and mitzvahs. And it's not very intellectual. Everybody's been at dinner parties where somebody very clever is explaining all this and how you can do this and how you can, but it's all bullshit. It's all rubbish. I'm sorry the tape's on. I shouldn't have said that, but that's the truth. That's the truth. So it has to be a skafir and a skapcha. You have to say no to that which is no good and turn that which is no good into something good. Okay. Got to page 2 here. Just a minute.
Save it for next week.
Okay. Just one last thing, because it's in the second section of Kedoshim, and it's so important that it would be remiss to leave it out. I'll try and deal with it in under 5 minutes. In the second Sedra, we have the famous directive. I mean, these are hard. These 2 Sedras are hard because from everything we've been saying, it's very inconvenient to hear this, But we have, in the second of the 2 Sedras, we have the obligation of that you have to love your fellow Jew like yourself. And any honest person has to say, how can you do that? How can you love somebody, another Jew, like yourself? Now, if you say a soldier in Israel at the moment, I can love him terrifically, right? And I admire him, and you tell a story of somebody who has that level of bravery and he goes back in to fight. And they're fighting for us. So of course you feel grateful to him and you love it. But that's not the mitzvah. The mitzvah is a commandment, not a recognition of what you do. There's no points. You love your wife. There's no points to say you got to love your wife. If you already love her, what's the big deal? To say you have to love a fellow Jew like yourself, and the fellow Jew is somebody you don't know in the army in Israel, what's the big deal? I want to ask you how you do with this mitzvah for the guy that lives next door and who spoils your life with music at 2 o'clock in the morning. His kids are driving, doing whatever they're doing, playing the drums, bashing up, and they don't do their garden, they don't put out their garbage, the garbage stinks, the grass is all overgrown, and you're really proud of your house and you're proud of your grass, whatever it is. This guy you got to love like yourself. Can you do that? Who can do that? It's very difficult, right? And yet, it's a fundamental mitzvah. It's not just a wobbly area. It's a fundamental requirement. So it's explained in Tanya. There are 2 pathways to this. The first pathway is if you think guf to guf, body to body, you're never going to be able to do it. Why? Because when he's stealing your space and stealing your peace and quiet and ruining your house and leaving the back door open all the time or parking across your garage so you can't get your car out, whatever he's doing that is driving you crazy, if you're looking at the physical action, of course you're not going to like it. But if you understand that he has a neshama, and that the neshama is Acharei-Kedoshim, it's a part of God himself, and you have the same you have a neshama, and you are a part of God Himself, and you and Him are actually spiritually brothers. You and Him are actually spiritually the same blood supply, spiritually. Now it's a whole different thing. Now the perspective is very different. And the other way of looking at this comes not from the Alter Rebbe, but from the Tzemach Tzedek. And the Tzemach Tzedek says this. He says, what does it mean to love another Jew like you love yourself? It means that when you do something wrong, right, you cut yourself slack. That's what you do. That's normal. If Chaim Yankel has been to all the shiurim on secretaries and not sleeping with, committing adultery or whatever it is that he does, and he's going home and he's not going to tell her because that would make no sense and only make her unhappy, and you think it through, and really it was the secretary's fault. She whatever system he does, he cuts himself some slack. And let's say he's a good man and he's going to do, and he does tshuva, and he's never sleeps with the secretary again. Right? He's a good. He's learned from it. He's done tshuva. That tshuva is very powerful for his neshama. It's maybe even more powerful than if he never did it in the first place, because that's Baal tshuva can stand. A tzaddik can't stand where a Baal tshuva stands. So if he goes wrong and really fixes it, it's wonderful. But at the end of the day, he will cut himself slack for what he's done. So the Tzemach Tzedek says that's what you got to do with another yid. Another yid annoys you, he tramples on your flowers, he does whatever he does, but you got to cut him some slack. You got to think, if I grew up in his house, if I had his parents, if I had that mother, if I had that brother, if I had that sister, if I had that cousin, if I had the, I'm sure I would be worse. So I warned you at the beginning. This is not popular information, but there's something that you've got to understand with this. That for a Jew, it's like the plant and the animal to the human being, and from the human being to the Jew. For a Jew's nourishment, for a Jew's growth, for a Jew's happiness, for a Jew's fulfillment, he needs to keep Torah and mitzvahs. So he needs to understand what the boundaries are. You can't keep all of them straight away. Everybody understands that. But not to know where they are, and not to know that one is God's orders and the other is human logic. Human logic allows for 1,500 children a day gassed in Auschwitz. That's human logic. Jews are terrible. They poison the water. They kill our children. They do whatever myth they believe in. So what do? You get rid of them. And how do you get rid of them? The most efficient way possible. That's human logic. So now you're allowed to murder. Not only murder, 1,500 children a day was the quota in Auschwitz. The quota. And that's human logic. And it gets you there. And those people were killing the children during the day and going home to their wives and children, having dinner with them.
It was different with the woke generation.
Huh?
What different with the woke generation?
Yeah. It's a matter. It's more extreme.
Exactly.
But the reality is that we have to understand that our Torah, that those rules are made of steel. They're not bendable. They're not arguable or negotiable. But the point is that it's like the violin string. You make your best music as a Jew keeping Torah and mitzvahs. That's the best music you can make. It's not, doesn't seem as gratifying. You don't seem to think you're going to have as much pleasure. It's not true, because you get a different level of gratification, different level of pleasure. So look home, guys.
So what percentage of Jews in the world don't know what the halakhic requirements
I think I'm